You avoid the bathrooms at work because of your contamination fears. You lose focus on your projects because of the distressing, intrusive thoughts that just won't stop. This is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to how OCD can affect you at work. This year's World Mental Health Day is themed around mental health in the workplace. So in this video, I'm going to take you through the ways in which OCD can affect you in the workplace, and keep watching because I'm going to give you some tips on how you can manage OCD in your work. Welcome to my channel. I am Dr. Liz White, a consultant clinical psychologist, and I've been helping people with anxiety and OCD for over 20 years. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you haven't already. Now, first, if you're not sure what OCD is, then check out this video. But just to quickly recap, OCD is a mental health condition characterized by obsessions and compulsions. Obsessions are persistent, intrusive, distressing thoughts and doubts that cause a great deal of anxiety. Compulsions, on the other hand, are repetitive behaviors and actions that you feel compelled to do to reduce the anxiety, the doubt, and the uncertainty. Now, just because you experience OCD, it doesn't necessarily mean that it will impact you in your job. There are lots of people that can function perfectly well at work and still experience OCD symptoms. But there are other people where their symptoms are so debilitating they actually can't even get to work. So here are some ways that OCD can show up in the workplace. Now, I'm going to be using examples, but I can't possibly describe all of the ways in which OCD can show up in your work. But I'd be really interested in hearing your experience of OCD in the workplace, so do let me know in the comments. So firstly, OCD can impact on your productivity and focus. So being distracted by intrusive thoughts and getting stuck in compulsions at work. So for example, if the OCD centers around morality and being a good person and doing the right thing, then you may find it really difficult to write emails or write documents because there may be intrusive thoughts that show up saying, what if you put a swear word in that email? And that will lead into compulsions to check and recheck over and over again. Or you may just generally feel the need to be meticulous in your work because maybe there's a nagging doubt that you've done something wrong somewhere. Now, all of this takes up your time. It slows down your productivity and your efficiency in your job. Now, context is important here. You may have a job where attention to detail is actually super important. So it can be an advantage to be someone who is diligent and checks things. But if paying attention to detail is driven by anxiety, is driven by doubt and OCD, rather than actually this is part of my job, paying attention to detail, then it has the potential to create a lot of stress and anxiety, which I'll talk about in a moment. Now, experiencing OCD means that you will experience doubt. And when you experience doubt, you tend to have difficulty making decisions. And what do you do when you're unsure or you're uncertain of something? Well, you check it out with someone else, don't you? That is perfectly natural. But in OCD, that asking someone else, that seeking reassurance, can quickly become a compulsion in of itself. You may find yourself constantly asking your boss or your colleagues, is this okay? Is that okay? And that can lead to strained work relationships, which I'm going to talk about next. So if your colleagues, if your boss is having to give reassurance to you a lot, then that has the potential to encroach on their work. You know, they're taking time to give you that reassurance. Or if you are getting stuck in compulsions at work, then maybe other team members are having to pick up the slack. And this just has the potential to lead to difficult work relationships. Timekeeping can be a real challenge in OCD. So OCD may prevent you from getting out of the house on time. Maybe you feel the need to check all the doors and the windows and all the electric equipment in your house before you can leave the house. Or you may have compulsions at the end of the day. So you may have to check your laptop several times to check that it's switched off. You may be late for meetings because you're so distracted by the intrusive thoughts. There are so many ways in which OCD can impact on your ability to manage your time at work. When OCD is impacting you at work, it can be really difficult to see everyone else is busy working away. They don't have to deal with these distressing intrusive thoughts. They don't have to deal with compulsions. And you can end up feeling very different from everyone else, maybe not feeling good enough. And this can impact on your mood, and it can also affect how you show up in your work. Because when you feel like this, you tend to withdraw. Maybe you're not having office chats like everyone else does, or maybe you're eating lunch by yourself, not going to socials, which just reinforces that isolated feeling. Avoidance can be a big part of the OCD experience. So, for example, as I alluded to earlier, if you have contamination fears, you may just flat out avoid all of the bathrooms at work. If you experience harm OCD and you're having intrusive thoughts about a particular person at work, then you naturally are going to avoid that person. Or if your symptoms are just so difficult to manage whilst working, then you may go off sick. So I call anxiety, stress, and irritability the added layer in the OCD experience. OCD is not conducive to feeling relaxed and calm at work because it causes stress, it causes anxiety and uncertainty, and this can make you more irritable or maybe more grumpy at work. And of course, if you're in a stressful job anyway, then OCD is just going to make that worse. You may find that you're really struggling to strike a good balance between work and home life. You may stay late at work because you may feel like you haven't been as productive as everyone else, or maybe you just haven't done the things that you needed to that day because of the compulsions. So if you are compensating in that way, you may be on the road to burnout. Now, I have a great video on stress and how to manage stress, so do go check that out. So, given that OCD can impact on a whole host of things in your job, in your work, how do you manage it? Let's find out. So first and foremost, one thing that people sometimes don't realize is that you don't have to tell your employer that you experience or you've been diagnosed with OCD. Now, I'm talking about this from a UK perspective. So if you are outside of the UK, you may have different laws and you will need to check out your country's laws and rules around employment. Now, there are pros and cons to disclosing to your employer that you have OCD. If you do disclose, it means that you can have an open discussion about any reasonable adjustments that you might need. And I think depending on the relationships that you have at work, it can help you feel more supported. Many people, though, are really reluctant to tell their employers that they experience OCD because they fear judgment and they fear misunderstanding. It's really common to worry that if you told your boss that you experience OCD, they might see you differently or they may think that you can't do your job properly. And let's face it, there is still a lot of stigma around OCD. And I think it depends very much on the culture at your work and how the organisation manages mental health issues. Some organisations encourage a very open discussion about mental health. They may put on specific training around mental health issues or have mental health champions that you can go and talk to. But a lot of organisations don't have any of that. So I think the upshot of this is that it's very individual whether you disclose or not, and it will depend a lot on the organisation that you're in and the relationships that you have with your colleagues and your boss. So if you're trying to decide whether to tell your boss that you experience OCD, then have a think about your organisation's general approach to mental health. Does the culture feel supportive around mental health issues? Is there anyone that you know that experiences mental health issues? And what has their experience been of getting support within the organisation? And I think once you know those things, you can make more of an informed decision. My second tip for managing OCD in the workplace is to manage stress. So things like make sure you're taking breaks, make sure you take your lunch break, maybe get outside for your lunch break. Try and maintain a healthy work-life balance. Keep an eye on if you're going over the hours that you're contracted for. And balance comes from doing stuff outside of work. So having hobbies, seeing friends and family, spending time doing things that you enjoy. So, in terms of managing obsessional thinking and compulsions at work, if the OCD is really impacting on your functioning in your job, then ideally you would see a therapist or a mental health professional to help you with that. There are some really effective treatments for OCD, and a lot of organizations have private healthcare or an employee assistance program where you can get access to trained therapists. But if you don't have that, you could try delaying compulsions. And this works for whether the compulsions are actions that you can see, i.e., hand washing, or more mental compulsions. So if you're in the middle of something at work and the intrusive thoughts are showing up and there's an urge to do a certain compulsion, then try this. Pause, take a deep breath in and out, really pay attention to the breath, and then say to yourself, I notice OCD wants me to do X, or if it's an intrusive thought, you would say, I notice I'm having the thought that, and then say, but I am choosing to do Y right now, and then refocus your mind on the task at hand. Try not to isolate yourself. Get involved with your colleagues and what's happening at work. Even if you don't feel like it, stop and chat at the coffee station or go to lunch with a colleague. OCD has a knack of making your life smaller and smaller over time. So sometimes people have to make a conscious effort to really dig deep and do the things that feel hard. And that may feel really uncomfortable, but it is worth it in the end. So there are some ways that you can manage OCD in the workplace, but I'm really curious about your experience. What works well and what doesn't work well for you? Let me know. If you found value in this video, please consider subscribing and hit the like button.